Hi and welcome to lecture 3. In the previous lecture we talked about how including SQL fragments in your queries can make them real powerful, but there was an issue. There was an issue of SQL injection. So the question is, how do we get around that issue? And in this lecture we talk about two alternative ways to get around that issue. Number one, using the array condition syntax, and the second one is using the hash condition syntax. So the array syntax comes first, and it lets you specify the SQL fragment with a question mark followed by values or parameters. And it automatically performs a conversion on the input from your values. So remember how the hacker provided his own raw SQL, and he was able to do that because he escaped his own string with a single quote. So array syntax takes care of that and cleans that out for you, so you can't do that anymore. So because of that, it's immune to SQL injection, and there are similar approaches in other languages how to get rid of SQL injection. So let's take a look at how array condition syntax actually works. We're going to drop down to the console, and we could say age between question mark and question mark, and we provide an array of values, in this case 28 and 34, and 28 would go into the first question mark, 34 gets sort of compiled into the second question mark, and you have your query. So the query is still very powerful, but you're not providing the literal, the dynamic value as a literal into your SQL fragment. It's dynamic, it gets baked in by the system, and you're using the array condition syntax. Similarly, let's say you want to find all the people that have J in their either first name or last name. So you could do that. You could do first name like question mark or last name like question mark, and you could provide two parameters, in this case %J%, %J%. It's really the same parameter if you notice here, but the first one is going to go into the first question mark for first name, and the second one is going to go into the second question mark for last name. So you could have your powerful queries, you could have your likes, you could have your betweens, you could have your ors, so you still have a power, and it's immune to SQL injection. So array condition syntax is fine, and it's SQL injection safe, which is the most important part. But there are now two small problems. They're more like issues. Number one, you have to keep track of the order of parameters hiding behind the question mark. So if you have 5 question marks, you have to now look at the query and be like, okay, this is the first one. The first question mark was for this. Got it. The second question mark was for this. And provide the parameter for all the question marks. Number two, if you have n, let's say 2, 3 question marks that refer to the same value, you still have to provide that value multiple times, like we saw in the example in the first name and last name. You're really looking for the same value of J inside those attributes, but you had to provide the %J% 2 times because you had 2 question marks in your query. So is there a way to avoid that? So that's where the hash condition syntax comes in. It really takes care of both those issues. Instead of a question mark, you specify symbols which map to the values in the hash that is passed as the second parameter to the method. So in this case, you have person, where age is between min age as a symbol and max age as a symbol, and you provide a hash. And remember, if you provide a hash as a last parameter to your method, which in this case it is the last parameter, you have a where method, and you have this is your first parameter and this is your last parameter, you don't need the curlies. So in this case we are omitting the curlies. You could put them in if you want, and you have your SQL fragment, and you have your hash of min age and max age with its values. Min age 28, max age 32, I'm sorry, and that gives you the same query as the array hash syntax gives you. It's immune to SQL injection, and perhaps it's a little bit easier to read because instead of going, okay, question mark, you know it's min age and max age, and that's what you provide in your hash. And similarly, for the other issue we had of having to always provide a value, even if it's the same, in the hash syntax, you don't have to do that because you could just say first name like certain pattern or last name like a certain pattern. Oh yeah, and what is that pattern? Well, that pattern is percent %J%, and that enables you to do the same query as before, and perhaps it reads a little bit cleaner. So in summary, you always want to use either the array or hash condition syntax to avoid the SQL injection, and perhaps hash syntax seems more intuitive to most people, but array condition syntax works just as well. What's next? Next we'll talk about one-to-one association and relationships in the database in general.